She told everyone I was the reason our marriage failed, until I caught her in the act, and what happened next no one saw coming. Gentlemen, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what exactly pushes someone to betray the one they swore they'd love? I think we can all agree that cheating, no matter how it's framed, is a line that shouldn't be crossed. What I'm about to tell you, well, it could be the blueprint for one of those intense Tarantino-style dramas. If you happen to know Quentin himself, feel free to pass this along. So here's where it all began, with nothing more than a weird itch. I remember sitting at my desk just another regular day when my arm started itching like crazy. Absent-mindedly, I scratched at the spot, thinking it was nothing. But when I glanced down, I froze. There it was, a red, inflamed rash maybe an inch wide. Tiny bumps and faint little marks dotted the center. I leaned in, studying it like it was some kind of mystery. Curious and honestly a little creeped out, I decided to go get a second opinion. I stood up from my chair and made my way to the office next door, where my buddy and coworker Max was finishing up a report. "Hey Max," I said, holding out my arm like it was a science experiment gone wrong. "Take a look at this, what do you think?" Max examined it for a moment, then nodded with this knowing look. "Well, Jim, I'm no dermatologist, but that looks like some kind of bug bite. Doesn't seem like a mosquito though. Could be a spider, maybe something else. Either way, you should slap on a bit of cortisone cream and a dab of antibiotic ointment. And tonight, man, you might want to check your bedroom, just in case something eight-legged is lurking around." I thanked him and went back to my office, still rubbing my arm now and then. During my lunch break, I stopped by the pharmacy, picked up both ointments and applied them right there in the office bathroom like some kind of over-prepared scout leader. By the time I got home that evening, the redness had gone down quite a bit, and the itching had faded. Still, even though it wasn't bothering me anymore, something told me I should poke around our bedroom later and see if I could find the culprit. I figured I'd probably been bitten in my sleep. When I stepped through the door, the house already smelled like something straight out of a Sunday dinner, roast beef simmering in spices. My wife, Caroline, usually beat me home and had dinner going by the time I got in. That night was no different, at least on the surface. She was in the kitchen, her back turned as she stirred something on the stove. The light from the setting sun made her silhouette glow a little, almost like a painting. Then she turned, offered me a quick smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and said, "Dinner'll be ready in about 30 minutes. She leaned in for a kiss, just a quick one, more habit than affection. I bent down, kissed her lightly, and watched as she went back to her cooking like nothing had happened. "That's it," I mumbled to myself, the weight of that hollow gesture sinking into my chest. Lately she'd been so withdrawn, so cold. It wasn't just the lack of affection, it was the way she carried herself, like she was only halfway present in this marriage. I stood there watching her move around the kitchen. There was a tightness in my chest that hadn't let up in weeks. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Oh, and you forgot to take the trash out this morning. Now there's a full bag stinking up the place under the sink." I sighed. "I'll handle it in a bit," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, hoping to ease whatever tension was bubbling up between us. But I saw it. Her jaw clenched slightly and a flash of something, anger, maybe frustration, lit up her face before she turned away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for whatever was coming next. Something in me already knew, it wasn't just about an insect bite anymore. That was just the thread I'd started pulling on. "Why can't you just do it now?" Caroline snapped from the kitchen. Her voice was sharp, laced with that edge she'd been wearing more often lately. I paused, staring at the trash bag under the sink like it had personally insulted her. The tension in the room tightened. I wasn't looking for a fight, but it seemed like lately, everything I did, or didn't do, sparked one. Caroline, at 35, still turned heads when she walked into a room. Tall, confident, the kind of woman people listened to when she spoke. She led the underwriting department at a regional insurance company, a position she'd fought hard for and one she clearly took pride in. Me. I was just a guy in his mid-30s working as an engineer at a local consulting firm. Steady job, decent pay, nothing flashy. I'd never been the type to stand out in a crowd. I guess if you line me up with a group of guys in polos and jeans, I'd blend right in. Maybe that was part of the problem. In the early years of our relationship, we had something intense. Real passion, real connection. But over time that fire faded. Slowly. So gradually that I almost didn't notice until it was just gone. Still thinking about the rash on my arm, I reached out to my buddy Jake. Jake was one of those guys who had a green thumb and a weird knack for identifying every bug, leaf, and mushroom he came across. If anyone could tell me what bit me, or what else might be lurking in our house, it was him. I gave him a call. "Hey Jake, I need a favor," I said, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. I found a bug in the bedroom. Something I've never seen before. You think you could help me figure out what it is? Jake didn't hesitate. Sure, man. Can you describe it? Even better, I'll snap a close-up and email it to you. You'll get a better look that way. Sounds good. I'll take a look once it comes through. Hanging up, I grabbed my phone, snapped the clearest picture I could and sent it over. Then I stood there, still, for a second longer than I needed to. Something about that bug felt off. And something about that whole day just kept pulling at my gut. Jake's response didn't come right away. I figured he'd need a bit to look it over, so I redirected my focus. If that one bug had made it into our bedroom, there might be more. It was already late, so calling in an exterminator would have to wait until the morning. For now, I'd do what I could. Before I tore apart the bedroom, though, I sat down at my old computer and searched bed bugs on Wikipedia. What I found was unsettling, a deep well of information about these tiny parasites, how they nest, spread, and feed. The more I read, the more the skin on my arms prickled. That's when something unexpected happened. I was cleaning near the dresser when I noticed Caroline's gym bag propped against the side. I wasn't looking for anything. Honestly, I was just shifting things around when I saw it unzipped. Inside, tucked in a side pocket, was a tiny, discreet item I didn't recognize at first. I pulled it out slowly. It was a small, expensive-looking GPS tracker. My breath caught. I turned it over in my hand, my mind reeling. Why would she have something like this? My first thought was innocent. Maybe she lent the bag to someone else. Maybe a friend left it inside by mistake. But even as I tried to rationalize it, the truth settled heavy in my chest. That explanation didn't make sense, not with everything else. I stood there in the quiet room, heart pounding, questions racing through my head. Could this have something to do with her strange behavior? Her mood swings, the emotional distance, the way she'd been guarding her phone like it held the nuclear codes? Still, I forced myself not to spiral. Not yet. There could be a reasonable explanation. She'd always kept her personal conversations close, and I never questioned it. But this wasn't just private. It felt like a secret. I gently placed the tracker back where I found it and zipped the bag closed. Then, forgetting all about the bedroom search, I stepped into my small home office and closed the door behind me. I sat down slowly, staring at the wall, trying to piece it all together. What was I really looking at here? And did I even want to know? I had my doubts about whether tapping Caroline's phone would really get me anywhere. She was smart, too smart, honestly. If she was hiding something, she'd know how to cover her tracks digitally. That's when I figured a GPS tracker might be more effective. If I couldn't figure out what she was saying, maybe I could at least figure out where she was going. So I pulled out my credit card and placed the order. Rush delivery, of course. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. Just as I finalized the purchase, I heard the front door open. Caroline walked in without a word, carrying a small gym bag in her hand. She didn't even glance in my direction. That's when it hit me, she wasn't just going to the gym. No, this felt different. The bag, the timing, the way she moved, everything screamed like she was heading off to meet someone. My chest tightened. I felt the kind of stillness that only comes when you're watching something fall apart right in front of you. I followed her to the door quietly, not saying anything, and soon she was backing out of the driveway. She drove off, and I went to my office where I had set up a small recorder near the hallway window. I'd caught something. Sure enough, as I played it back, I could hear the radio humming in the background from her car, and then, her voice. Clear as day. Hi. Yeah, are you ready for tonight? What's that? Oh, perfect. Same time and same place, right? That works for me. I'll see you soon. Love you so much. There it was. She said it, I love you. Not to me. Not to a friend. But to him. I felt cold. The kind of cold that creeps in slowly and then settles in your bones. You know, deep down you hope you're wrong. You cling to that sliver of doubt, even as the truth screams at you. But once those words hit my ears, everything inside me just shifted. And then something clicked. I remembered him. His name was Joel. We'd met before, actually more than once. He was a frequent face at some of the office parties Caroline dragged me to over the years. One of those smooth-talking guys with a handshake too firm and a smile too practiced. His wife, Melanie, was always close by, sharp eyes, sharp tongue, and the kind of woman who didn't let things slide. I suddenly wondered, did Melanie have any idea what her husband was up to? And more importantly, what would she do if she found out? I wouldn't have to wonder for long. That night, things went sideways. Joel and Caroline must have slipped up because somehow, Melanie found out. Whether she followed him or caught a message, I'll never know. But I do know this, she showed up. And she wasn't alone. She stormed into the apartment building where Joel was staying, fire in her eyes. Someone must have cracked the door or left it chained, because Melanie slammed it open so hard the chain snapped clean off. In the process, the door smacked Joel in the shoulder, knocking him back with a yelp of pain. I was watching from the end of the hallway, completely unnoticed. She marched in like a force of nature, eyes locked on Caroline and Joel like she'd been waiting for this moment. Words flew, accusations, fury, betrayal. Melanie's voice echoed down the hall, but even from a distance, I could feel the burn of every word. Oddly, I didn't move. For a brief, twisted second, I was completely absorbed in the chaos, like a spectator watching a train wreck in slow motion. But that moment didn't last. Her rage escalated so fast that the situation turned violent. A loud crack rang out, something heavy falling or breaking, I couldn't be sure. My view was blocked for a moment, but the sounds told the story. It wasn't just yelling anymore. Joel was hurt. Caroline too. That's when reality set back in. I needed to get out of there. I wasn't supposed to be part of this mess, not physically at least. People started filtering out of their apartments. Phones came out. Someone called the police. And me? I did what instinct told me to do. I slipped quietly down the stairwell, my heart thudding as I disappeared into the night like I'd never been there. I didn't speed. I didn't slam the door. I just slid behind the wheel, started the engine and drove away, steady hands but a mind in pieces. By the time I pulled into a nearby lot to collect myself, the flashing lights from squad cars and news vans were just beginning to die down. The scene behind me, of betrayal, violence and loss, was slowly folding itself back into silence. Some people might say I acted heartlessly. That I should have stayed. Should have asked questions. Should have held her hand. But how do you hold the hand of someone who shattered the vows you built your life around? She chose her path. And now I had to walk mine. I sat quietly for a few minutes before approaching one of the officers standing near the remaining patrol vehicles. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady but hollow. "Can you tell me who's handling this situation? I just learned something tonight about my wife. She was cheating. So I guess in a way I can't say I'm shocked by how this ended. But I still need to understand what happened." The officer looked at me with a heavy expression, one that told me he'd had to share far too many truths with people like me. "Yes, sir. We've taken statements and I'm sorry to inform you that the other woman, Joel's wife, passed away at the scene." His words hit like a slow, cold wave. I stood there stunned. Oh my God. She didn't make it? "No, sir. I'm truly sorry." I closed my eyes. My chest felt like it had been cracked open. "And my wife, Caroline? She's been taken to the city morgue," he said gently. "She survived, but she's in custody. She's going to need to be identified formally. We'll have to speak with you again tomorrow." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. I'll come by in the morning and make arrangements." I turned and walked away before the moment could swallow me whole. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I locked every door and every window. I wasn't sure if it was for safety, or just to feel like I had some control again. I told myself it was just precaution. After all, the police would want a clean timeline, and I needed to protect myself in case things got twisted down the line. I was no one's villain in this. I went to bed early, hoping to escape into rest. But sleep didn't come easy. Instead, I lay there in the dark, trapped in a loop, reliving every second of the day like a movie I couldn't turn off. Every detail played over and over. Her voice, his name, the door slamming, the sirens, the silence. And through it all, one question kept circling in my head. Could I have done something different? Could I have stopped any of this before it spiraled out of control? But the deeper I searched for answers, the clearer it became. No. No, I couldn't have saved something that had already drowned long before I knew it. I thought back to when it all began. Caroline and I met through work. I was handling systems designed for a client, and she was one of the lead underwriters at the regional office. We crossed paths at a few company events, charity dinners, networking meetups, the usual stiff-lipped office banter. But there was something about her. She wasn't just beautiful, though she absolutely was. It was her presence. The way she carried herself, calm and commanding. She had this sharpness about her, this confidence that drew people in. Including me. Our connection grew fast, and before I knew it, we were off on our first weekend getaway. Just the two of us, pretending we were the only people in the world. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't just infatuated with her looks. I was mesmerized by her mind. She was brilliant, composed, almost untouchable. And that was part of the problem. Because when you fall for someone who always seems 2 steps ahead, it's easy to feel like you're never enough. I'd felt that before, in past relationships. Sometimes it was my job that got in the way, keeping me on the road or stuck in meetings. Other times, it was the insecurity that crept into my partners, especially when I had to travel with other colleagues, attractive, charismatic people who sparked jealousy where there was no cause. But Caroline? She was different. Or so I thought. She never questioned me. Never doubted. Maybe that's why I trusted her so fully. Ava had been the only other one like that, an old flame from my pilot days. She never feared losing me even when I was thousands of miles in the air. But like everything else, that story ended too. Funny enough, the cracks with Caroline didn't start to show until a few months back. Right before her birthday, things began to shift. And I hadn't seen it coming. I threw myself back into work, trying to focus, trying to find peace in routine, but Caroline's mood didn't change. Even with distance between us, her coldness lingered like a fog I couldn't shake. A week later, I decided to face it head-on. I caught her in the kitchen one evening, the light overhead casting long shadows on her face. "Can we talk?" I asked gently, searching for something, anything, that might still connect us. She glanced up but didn't really look at me. "I'm not mad," she said flatly. "I'm just used to you not being here." There was something sharp in those words. Something that even a child would pick up on. I wanted a real conversation, a deep one, the kind we used to have in the early days. But she shut me down before I could even begin. "What's the point, Michael?" she said, arms folded. "It always ends up the same. Me compromising." Was she painting herself as the victim here? It sure felt that way. Like I was the one who had pushed her into some cold corner of this marriage, when all I'd been trying to do was keep us steady. Things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. She began growing insecure in new ways. Unexpected, even irrational. Anytime I came home with a fresh haircut or wore a new cologne, her eyebrows would rise. "Who are you trying to impress now?" she'd ask like it was some kind of accusation. At first I laughed it off. I thought she was teasing. But her tone never matched a joke. She was serious. I reminded her gently that my job required me to look professional. As a pilot, appearances mattered. People trust you with their lives. You don't show up looking disheveled. She knew that. Or at least I thought she did. But the comments kept coming. Every minor change in my routine seemed to trigger suspicion. The woman who once admired my discipline and drive now questioned every reason behind it. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't rewind time. But I could try to make things right. And I thought I had the perfect opportunity, her birthday. It hadn't gone well last year. Tensions were high, emotions raw. But this time I wanted it to be different. So I planned. For weeks. I arranged time off work and told my boss I'd be out of the country for a few days, unreachable even for emergencies. I needed to give this my full attention. But I kept it a secret from Caroline. I pretended to forget her birthday, pretending to be too busy, too distracted. It stung to act that way, but it was all part of the surprise. Behind the scenes, I was orchestrating something special. I ordered all her favorite foods, picked out gifts that meant something, reserved a cozy, secluded spot for a weekend getaway. I wanted to remind her what we had. What we still could have. When the night finally came at exactly 11:30 p.m., I quietly said goodbye to my friends, who had helped with the planning, and headed home, heart pounding with anticipation. I crept in with my key, careful not to make a sound, imagining her surprise when she saw me standing there with wine, flowers, and a night already written in love letters. But the moment I stepped into the living room, I knew something was wrong. Caroline's voice echoed down the hallway, low and tense, like she was whispering into the dark. She was speaking to someone. Not on the phone. To someone right there with her. I stepped forward cautiously. "I can explain, just let me talk. Please just let me explain," she begged. I rushed into the room. There he was. A man. Mid-30s, clean-cut, looking startled but not afraid. My heart felt like it stopped. "Who are you?" I asked, eyes locked on him. He looked at me, frustrated, hands slightly raised. "She hired me." "What?" "She paid for my time." "Through an agency," he said quickly. "This isn't romantic. This isn't what you think. I'm not here because of any affair." I blinked, trying to make sense of his words. "You're an escort?" He nodded slowly. "Of a kind, yes. But not in that way. She booked me for companionship. Conversation. Whatever emotional support she needed. No physical stuff. She was clear about that." Caroline stood behind him, shaking, pleading with her eyes. "Michael, I didn't know how else to cope. I felt so alone. I didn't want to cheat on you. I just needed someone who could listen. Someone who wasn't going to judge me." I stood there, stunned. Numb. All those nights I thought she was with someone, she was just not in the way I imagined. But the betrayal? It still cut just as deep. I looked at Ava, really looked at her, and asked with what little strength I had left, "Did you cancel the hotel?" She nodded faintly, and that was all the confirmation I needed to turn away. I shut myself in the bedroom and stayed there the rest of the day. No explanations. No arguments. Just silence and a bottle. I don't remember how much I drank. Enough to silence the noise in my head. Enough to lose track of time until the weight of everything knocked me out cold. I didn't want to hear her reasons, her excuses, her sorrow. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the strength to crawl into the mess inside her head and try to make sense of it. But I knew she was still in the house. Every now and then I heard her soft knocks at the door. Her voice would follow, quiet, broken, asking me to come out, asking me to talk. But I stayed there, surrounded by stale air, a spinning ceiling, and thoughts I couldn't outrun. Eventually, I realized if I stayed in that room any longer, it would swallow me whole. That evening, I reached out to my boss completely on my own. "I can't fly right now," I told him. "My head's not clear. I'd be a danger in the cockpit." And it was true. I couldn't even trust myself to stand straight, let alone guide passengers through the skies. Taking a break felt like the only logical step. I packed a bag. Not for a vacation. Not for work. Just for space. My family had a home in the countryside, an old farmhouse that once belonged to my grandparents. After they passed, my uncle took over the place. He lived alone, quietly tending to the land, disconnected from the noise of the world. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. And right now, that was all I needed. As I stood at the door with my suitcase in hand, Ava reached out, not to stop me but to say something. "Anything. I just wanted more time with you," she whispered. But before I could say a word, something in her cracked wide open. "You're so selfish, Michael," she snapped, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. "You always disappear when things get hard. On my birthday you left, again. You always leave. And that day I realized something, I didn't matter to you." Her voice trembled as she dropped the final weight. "That night I made a choice. I told myself I'd stop waiting for you. I started living for me for once. I started doing what made me feel wanted." She hesitated, and then her voice dropped lower, laced with guilt and defiance. "I've slept with other men, Michael. Some for money. Some not. I told myself it didn't matter because I wasn't cheating, I was surviving." Her words hit like a brick to the chest. I couldn't even process them all at once. She kept talking, pleading, promising she'd do anything to fix this, to save our marriage. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because no matter how many promises she made, no matter how broken she looked, I couldn't unhear what she said. And maybe it sounds harsh. Maybe it sounds cruel. But I knew in that moment, with painful clarity, I couldn't stay married to someone who not only cheated, but justified it by accusing me of something I never did. That trust, it was gone. Shattered. When we eventually returned to the city, I decided to tell the truth. Her parents deserved to know. I thought maybe they could help her, guide her toward something better. But that conversation didn't go how I hoped either. Her father's face darkened the moment I started to explain. "You're making this up," he barked. "Trying to run away from your responsibilities just so you can be rid of my daughter." I didn't fight back. I didn't argue. I just stood there disappointed. Not just in him, but in all of it. In the end, I walked out of that house alone. Just like I walked out of my own. I confronted Ava again. I needed answers, real ones this time. Not vague apologies or emotional detours. Calm but firm, I made it clear. If I had to take legal action, I would. And if we needed a therapist to mediate, then fine, we'd bring one in. But either way, I wasn't leaving that conversation empty-handed. That's when she finally cracked. Her words came slowly at first, then with more force, like she'd been rehearsing them. And just like I expected, she didn't take responsibility. Not truly. She spun everything to make herself look like the victim in a story where I was cast as the distant, uncaring husband. She accused me of being selfish, of not letting her in emotionally. She said she felt pushed out, like she had no choice but to look elsewhere for comfort. According to her, my inability to connect had left her vulnerable. Classic deflection. She didn't say I made mistakes. She said I drove her to them. I listened. I let her speak. But all I heard was someone desperate to dodge the guilt she didn't want to carry. And honestly, that kind of behavior wasn't new to me. You see, this wasn't the first time I'd been left questioning the loyalty of someone I loved. About a year ago, my wife, Anna, from a previous chapter of my life, became deeply invested in personal finance. It started harmless enough. She got into budgeting apps, picked up a few books and started watching videos online about investing and wealth building. I admired her drive. She wanted to secure our future and I couldn't fault that. Me. I'd always kept it simple. Basic stocks, the usual retirement accounts. I didn't know the ins and outs of markets or real estate strategies, but I supported her new passion. At first. But as her interest grew, so did her distance. Soon, she was attending weekend seminars and late-night Zoom sessions with people she met through online forums. It seemed innocent at first, just networking. But then she stopped involving me altogether. She took over all the household finances and I let her. I trusted her. Then came the red flags. She started spending more and more time with her mentor, a guy named Derek. I'd never met him, but I heard his name often enough to raise a brow. At first, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to come off as controlling. But the nights got longer. The conversations behind closed doors became more frequent. And she began pulling away. Emotionally. Physically. Entirely. We started living like roommates. Passing each other in the hallway. Sharing meals in silence. Sleeping back to back in the same bed without saying a word. It was like she'd carved out a new life in front of me, and I was no longer part of it. One night, I walked past a conference hall where Derek was supposedly holding a financial literacy session. Something told me to go inside. I just had a feeling. And what I saw confirmed every fear I'd buried deep. It wasn't a finance class. It wasn't even a discussion. It was something much more personal. I watched from the back, quietly, unnoticed. Her laugh rang out, a laugh I hadn't heard in our home in months. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I knew she'd deny it if I ever brought it up. So I needed the truth. Not just for myself but for whatever came next. And then I saw it. He leaned in, gently touching her shoulder, whispering something into her ear that made her smile like she used to smile at me. Then, slowly, he moved closer and began softly kissing her neck. She didn't resist. She didn't stop him. She leaned into it. I lowered the phone, heart pounding. Not in shock. Not even in rage. Just confirmation. Evidence that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't the one destroying the relationship. That I was just the guy left watching it die in real time. I caught it all on camera, every lingering look, every stolen touch. And right at the moment they were about to kiss, when their bodies leaned just close enough, I decided I wasn't going to be a silent witness anymore. I walked straight up to their table, calm on the outside but boiling inside. I pulled out the chair across from them and sat down without a word. Anna went stiff, her face drained of color. The man, her so-called mentor, looked at her like he'd just walked into the wrong scene of a bad movie. I didn't raise my voice. Not at first. I just looked her in the eye and said, "You don't need to worry about me. I take care of myself just fine." But then the anger broke through. The pain, the humiliation, I couldn't keep it all in. My voice got louder, sharp with betrayal. Head started turning. I saw the judgment in the eyes of strangers at nearby tables, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay there another second. I stood up abruptly and stormed out of the cafe. Anna chased after me, grabbing at my arm like she could pull everything back to the way it was. I pulled away hard, looking her in the face one last time. "Go talk to your mentor," I said flatly. "You're not welcome in my home anymore." And with that I walked away. The emptiness hit like a wave when I stepped through the front door of our house. Our home. The place we built. And now it felt like nothing more than a shell. I understood that Anna had dreams, ambitions, but chasing them with another man? That wasn't something I could accept. I gave her space. I didn't beg. I didn't call. She packed her things and left 2 days later. It was a Saturday. I was lying on the couch, scrolling through some news when I heard the door open. Anna walked in like she still belonged there. But she made it clear from the start, there would be no apologies. "I'm not here to talk or ask for anything," she said. "I'm just here for what I left behind." She gathered the last of her belongings without saying another word and walked out of my life for good. No remorse. No regret. Just cold, practiced detachment. And still it haunted me. Not the loss of the relationship, but the betrayal. The rewriting of our story. She began telling people I'd crawl back to her. That I'd beg for her once she struck it rich. She painted me as the one who couldn't handle her ambition. That our marriage failed because I feared her success. It was laughable, if it didn't hurt so much. I wished her well. Good luck, I'd say when people repeated her claims to me. That's all I had left to offer. But karma has its own sense of timing. That financial mentor of hers? The one who ran the seminars and charmed everyone with promises of wealth? He turned out to be a fraud. A con artist. He swindled dozens of people, including Anna, convincing them to sink money into a fake investment scheme with the promise of massive returns. Anna had invested nearly 30% of her income into it, and it was all gone. The guy vanished, likely fled the country. The authorities had leads but nothing solid. No arrests. No refunds. Just broken dreams and empty accounts. When I heard the news I felt nothing. Just a quiet, exhausted sense of confirmation. This was the end of her fantasy. And maybe, finally, the end of mine too. Anna eventually came back weeks later. Not to fix anything. Not really. Just looking for someone to help carry the weight she was suddenly drowning under. Her eyes were tired. Red. Empty. She told me she was sorry. That she'd been crying for days. That the depression had hit so hard she didn't know what to do anymore. She'd lost her savings. Some jewelry. Part of her salary. And now she had nothing. I listened. I didn't interrupt. But I made it clear I wasn't coming back. She begged. Said she'd do anything. Said maybe if she'd begged me the first time, right when I found out, maybe I'd have forgiven her. Maybe she was right. But now I'd seen too much of who she really was. I'd seen the part of her that traded loyalty for ambition and truth for convenience. I wasn't naive anymore. And I certainly wasn't going to be the safety net for someone who only came back when everything else failed. So I closed the door. And I haven't opened it since. I'm not rushing into dating. It's not about forgetting. It's not even about moving on in the way most people mean it. It's about rebuilding. Quietly. Carefully. I've started to learn more about finance myself now, on my terms. I'm taking my time. Learning how real wealth in any form is built. Slowly, with discipline, with courage. And as for love, I'm not ready for it yet. But when I am, I'll know. Because next time, I won't be looking for someone to build a fantasy with. I'll be looking for someone to build truth with.